The skills and credentials you need for the career you want are within reach at University of Maryland Global Campus. An accredited state university, UMGC offers online courses, personalized advising, lifetime career services, and more. Visit umgc.edu/podcast.
Gearheads know that some projects need so many parts, it feels like you need a whole storage unit just to store them. That's what eBay Motors' 122 million parts are for. Think of it as your virtual parts garage. They've always got the right fitment at the right prices. Use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Hey everyone, this is the Almost World Podcast. Bringing to you mind-blowing interviews with guests from all over the world. So settle down, relax, and enjoy the show. Oh yeah, by the way, if you like the podcast, please support Elmo's World Podcast on Patreon. Your support is what helps the podcast improve more and more. Welcome to Elmo's World Podcast. I am Elmo, and I have my awesome friend here, Mark Lane. Hey man, can you introduce yourself?
What's up, Elmo? Hey, yeah, this is Mark Lane. I grew up an evangelical Christian. My dad has actually been a Southern Baptist pastor since I was about 2 years old. I always took my faith very seriously. It affected every aspect of my life, and now it doesn't. Now I'm an atheist.
Mm-hmm. So can you tell me why you left Christianity and became an atheist?
Well, I started having a lot of questions about things that I read in the Bible in my 20s, and started having a lot of theological questions, like whether hell was a literal place, just kind of simple things like that. I had a few friends that had left the church and became agnostic, and I would talk to them a lot, remained close with them. And I would ask them questions, like why they thought that. And they would bring up that, well, you really can't know that there's God. And basically it's just kind of arrogant to say that when really you just have faith. Or perhaps you think it's more probable that there is one for, some reason that you have. And so after that, without really giving it much thought, I became kind of an agnostic theist. And that was the extent of that. I didn't really, besides some of the questions I had, I didn't really doubt a lot. And then, like, the more and more I read the Bible, and the more and more I learned about theology, the more questions I had, doubts I started to have, which I would always just table to the side because I didn't feel like I had the authority to seriously entertain those doubts, and then I stumbled upon like the Liturgist podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all, but they're kind of like progressive Christians. Like they don't really broadcast it a lot or advertise it a lot, whatever word you want to use there. But they're basically like pantheist Christians. Most Christians would consider them heretical and just like totally radical and not really even part of the tradition. But, through them, I kind of discovered that there's a lot of people out there that do believe like that. And I just started listening to them, and I really felt like I had permission to actually question my beliefs. And so I did. And I began deconstructing my faith. I started listening to a lot of different people with different views. One interview that they had in particular was with a musician that I really liked. His name's David Bazan. And his interview is pretty impactful for me. And I kind of catalyzed my deconstruction. I really, I was kind of like passionately into it at that point. And then I started listening even to a lot of deconversion stories on different podcast shows. And over time, I just kind of began to notice that, people that were not religious at all, people that had left their faith and, began a secular lifestyle, really were not any more or less ethical than religious people were, particularly, ones from the tradition that I grew up in, Southern Baptist. They just really weren't any more. It didn't really seem to make much of a difference in people's lives. And they also seem to have, pretty valid reasons for leaving their faith. And they seemed sincere. It didn't seem like, something like they just wanted to go out, party and have fun and just not and go around having sex all the time or whatever, just living like some hedonistic, sinful lifestyle. It seemed like they had good reasons to leave. And, after that, like I'm taking all this new exposure to different types of people and different worldviews in, and I'm continuing to deconstruct and transition into like a more progressive faith, and even like seriously entertain, the possibility that what if God doesn't exist? Maybe he doesn't exist. Like that could be, that could be what reality is. Maybe he's not real. And like around this time, this is like back in 2015, and, we have like the election, and Trump has somehow made it through like all of the debates and everything, and ends up being nominated. And then he gets elected, and a huge amount of his support is from like evangelical Christians. And I'm just thinking, like, how? how do Christians vote for somebody like this? Like, he's just like completely antithetical to the gospel, like this horrible, disgusting man. And they like, not only did they just vote for him, they also kind of glorified him. And that's not an argument against anything. It's no reason to really lose your faith, of course, but I think it led to me becoming apathetic enough about my faith to consider that, even though I had deconstructed into something more progressive, and I'd kind of answered some of the questions that I had about Christianity for myself, that kind of felt pretty satisfied with the new answers that I'd kind of come to. I really didn't have any good reason to believe anymore, other than like the waning sentimental value for the tradition that I had. And it was also like just totally subjective, you know, like how did I really know that my way of viewing things was right? Like, yeah, it was satisfying for me, but it was really just what I wanted to believe. I didn't really have sufficient reasoning for it. There's no way I could defend it.
When you said that these guys who left, Christianity and hold a more agnostic ethical framework now, you said that they seem to make sense, right? Their points seem to be valid, but so what is your standard for the validity or like a qualified ethical framework if it is very secular?
Perhaps like I don't consider things like that, but the way that, which was the way that I looked at it then, I was just like, seems like these guys have good reason, but I didn't know anything about philosophy or like logical fallacies or, I didn't really even know a lot of history of like the church or anything like that at the time. This was like a very primitive point in my life where I really just, didn't know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Like I go through a lot of that as well, and all of us, I believe, have, and we are limited in knowledge. But of course, it's your approach though to your worldview that matters, right? Like, are you consistent with what you believe? Is everything coherent? And so that's why I want to ask you, Mark, like, if you don't believe in God, um, what ethical framework do you live by?
Okay, so yeah, as an atheist, you don't have like absolute morality or absolute on anything because we operate empirically, right? Which I mean, I think whether you're religious or not, ultimately everybody operates that way. And, our senses are obviously fallible. But I think that using philosophy, using like reason, using like the scientific method, different schools of thought, we are able to come to different conclusions about things. And I think that like a principle of human flourishing can be backed by, pretty much any of those, any school of thought, like whether it's utilitarianism, consequentialism, all of it. It's, or humanism, whatever it is, like those are not abstract concepts or schools of thought, those are objective. And, if everything was just abstract and meaningless, we wouldn't have gotten to where we are now as a species, right?
Well, we could have actually, like we could have been just, fooling ourselves with these objective and, moral standards and still gotten to where we are right now. Right.
Well, I mean, if they put it this way, like if different values didn't have a practical effect that benefited the survival of our species, then, they wouldn't have done that. We would have just died out. Or, I mean, I guess I do see what you're saying. I guess it could just be like luck, but that seems really unlikely. Given how hard it is to survive on this planet,
So what you mean what you mean to say is that because we have survived as a species, therefore the ethical framework that we have, at least one of the ethical framework that we have abided in must be true.
Yeah, I think that's a good reason to think that the principle of human flourishing is a uh, good value to hold, and we have held it more and more over time. We've gotten better and better at.
It might seem like it, but how do you know it is true? Right, that human flourishing should be the thing that we should follow.
Well, nobody wants our species to go out, right?
But there are a lot of nihilists out there that would say differently. Like, how would you tell them that they're wrong, right?
Well, I don't think every nihilist, and I'm not a nihilist, more like in the existential camp, but I think a lot of nihilists really all they're doing is just negating the value of things.
Do you
And they would
think
probably
that
say,
things have value
yeah,
from your worldview? What do you
yeah,
mean
I
by
do.
value?
Like, well, I'm talking about human flourishing. Like, I think that's valuable. I think other people that are
What
around
is
me are
value? But
valuable.
how do you define value in a secular framework?
Value values things that we ought to consider important and essential to our lives, whether by their usefulness or by their beauty
So
or
we give things value, right?
yeah.
But that means that it wasn't really there, so it's not it's not in the essence of things. So
Yeah.
we give things value, but then you do have to think of like, um are we actually capable of giving things value? And if it seems to us that we give things value, like how do we know that this actually matters, right? Like, if you are I believe that if you are, a secular, if you do like have a secular worldview without a god, right? I'd say the nihilist point of view would actually be the most rational, and because um because we use value in value meaning, and those are actually sourcing from, like atheistic concepts, right? That's where they really come from. So if you are going to use those in a secular worldview, then that how you define it would, you know uh necessitate something like a god. It's in that sense. So that's why, but of course, right, like there are those existential nihilists who actually find meaning within nihilism. So that those could be your options, right?
Well, I mean, a lot of the forefathers of existentialism, like some of the most formidable minds in existentialism, are actually secular, and even many of them are atheist as well. And existentialism is kind of like the opposite of nihilism.
Yeah, you can be an
So,
existential nihilist though, right? Like within a nihilist framework, you can still they like for example Camus, right? He would be an existential nihilist, which is in a category of absurdism, right? So
yeah, but that's not nihilism though. That's absurdism. That's its
I,
own completely different.
well, it is still nihilistic, because in it's nihilistic in the sense that there is no inherent meaning in the world, right? And that's why it's absurdist, like they recognize that there is no meaning in the world, but because there's this absurdity that happens of me existing and having a life, I'm gonna recognize that it is absurd and I'm gonna roll with the absurdity. That's why it's called absurdism,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
so it is
it's
nihilistic.
also it's also like the potential absurdism of the world. Like you don't know that, like even Nietzsche said this, like uh you don't know that there's no absolute meaning. It's just that we can't understand an absolute meaning.
Well, in
Kind of like,
absurdists actually presuppose that there is no God and there is no meaning in everything. Like they presuppose that, and that's why they held firm in the absurdity of things. Right? They could doubt that things are absurd, but they affirm that things are absurd. So,
yeah,
yeah.
I don't know if Camus actually thought that, but I mean, maybe you're right. I don't know. I read several of his books and I didn't find that. But anyway, yeah, I'm probably not to get too hung up on that. I'm probably uh, more along those lines, I suppose. But I'd still say that even though we don't know that there is like an absolute or inherent meaning, that there are objective schools of thoughts that we can use to basically argue for principle of human flourishing, for instance, and other things too that are good for us as a species, and as the planet. And even if we were to cease existing at some point, which we, will, uh, those things are, basically like a priori. Like it's not de- those truths aren't dependent on our existence. It's not totally subjective to us. Like logic exists outside of us. It's just something that we've been able to understand over time. It's something that we've always used as a species before we understood it, or we're able to describe it and make more use of it. You know what I mean? But it exists outside of ourselves. Like you might say that God exists outside of ourselves. It kind of exists like that.
Okay. So in this sense, what do you mean by God exists inside or outside of ourselves?
Yeah. Well, no, I'm just, kind of making an analogy.
Oh
Like
yeah.
it's like, according to like the different religious traditions, God existed first. He's like the uncaused cause. And then he created us. So he didn't need us to exist, or, whatever
Yeah.
gender you want to put to him. Didn't his existence, God's existence was not contingent on anything else. And I don't think that logic's contingent or logic's existence or validity is contingent on our being able to talk about it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I guess it seems to me, and you, that things are just logical in and of themselves, right? Even if we don't talk about them, and then so it's not things are logical, and it's not contingent on us. Yes, I do agree. So in okay, in terms of this though, let me ask you. So let's say you were asked about murder, right? Why is murder wrong? I would assume you would say it's wrong, right? What makes it wrong?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that it's always wrong. I mean, well,
By
murder.
definition,
Well,
like intentionally killing someone out of hate, right?
yeah, that's wrong.
Why?
Well, if it was okay for everybody, or we thought it was okay for everybody to go around and kill everyone, then, we wouldn't survive very long as a species. And it would just be like a horrible existence for everybody.
So, it's wrong because it's not useful for society.
Yeah.
Okay. So, there are a lot of things that are not useful for society, like, but they do exist. So, are all of those unnecessary things that are not useful for society inherently wrong?
Well, what would be an example?
Let's say, the existence of, there is this uh, eyeglass here that it's just for fun. It's just glass, it doesn't even help me with sight, doesn't have shade or anything. It's just that's for fashion, right? So it's not useful for society. So is it wrong? So for is it is
It takes a lot of ingredients to fix or build a car, like cooking, but without the frozen dinner easy way out. eBay Motors has 122 million parts. It's always the right fitment, so you can follow any recipe to a T. Whether it's a vintage Italian coupe that's classic like grandma's meatballs, or a German luxury car that's as complicated as Oma's rouladen, to cook up something great in the garage, use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Holidays are here, and so is fashionable fitness. Gift yourself a Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3 5G, a phone that folds in half to literally stand on its own. Pair it with the Galaxy Watch 4 for ultimate wellness and wow factor. Check health stats, flex personal records. Over 90 activities can be tracked, like biking, swimming, golfing, and more. Invest in yourself with tech made to crush goals. Holidays open up with Galaxy. Shop it all at Samsung.com. 5G connection and availability may vary. Check with carrier. Products sold separately.
wrong for this to exist, to be able to manifest this, like all those that created it? And you could argue too, like, my hatred and my murdering of this person, it's useful for society, and so would that make it right then, if it is?
Well, I think that with your eyeglass thing, like, entertainment is useful to society, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. And my point though is, like, it's extremely subjective what being useful to society means, right? I can say this is useful to society. So what is your standard for what is useful to society? And you mean it in a utilitarian sense?
Yeah, well, it's and consequentialism too, like whatever angle you want to take there, like and it's not only that it's useful, it's that it would be detrimental to society if murder was okay. But not that, to distinguish murder from killing, like if somebody breaks into my house and is threatening my family, and I can stop it by suspending my value for human flourishing in this particular individual.
Let's say we're in a desert, right? When no society, any action we do in a desert would have no effect to society whatsoever, right? And if I, let's say, if I, intently, out of hate, like murder you, would that be wrong? we are like in a vacuum with that, and society has no, we have no impact, and we have no impact to society. Would that be wrong then, if that's your basis for your ethical framework of murder
Y-
being wrong?
Yeah, but we also don't live in a vacuum like that.
Yes, but like for example, if we are in a desert, right, and people do exist in deserts, and a lot of people, kill each other in deserts, right, where they have no impact to society. In that specific case, scenario, would murder be wrong?
I still think it would be wrong. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you'd be left to survive on your own. And also, like, the golden rule, like, why would you want to do that to somebody whenever you wouldn't want it to be done to you?
So who said that the golden rule that should be the ethical framework that we should follow? Why the
Well, it doesn't
rule?
matter. It
Why
doesn't
does it
matter that.
Why?
I don't think that it matters that that anybody said it. I think that what matters is that it's been effective for our species.
Yeah, but in terms of the effective for species, we are irrelevant to the species. Like we're isolated in a desert, and
even within like animals, like in primates, like if a bunch of which they they are violent towards each other.
If we base it on survival of the species, let's like me, murdering a person right in a desert would actually be good for the survival of my species, because I would I would be able to survive, and maybe eat you, or or maybe we would the available resources would extend my life, because I would be the only one to consume instead of sharing it with that person. So in that sense, right, like murdering for the survival of a species, would actually be good, right?
For the survival of you.
Yeah, in that specific case, I am the species, right? Because I am I am isolated in a desert, right? So
yeah, but that's a bit subjective, though. Like,
exactly, it is and that's the point, right? Like if that's your basis for what makes things good or bad, like it is absolutely a subjective. But of course, not saying that it's invalid. I'm just saying that if it's subjective, then there are all entailments to it, right? Like for example, if Hitler did use the same reasoning, hey, this is for the survival of the species, he could do like 100 holocausts, and if he used that reasoning, it would be qualified, right?
I don't think that's the same. I mean, like now you're talking about Hitler, and Hitler did not live in a desert. There was lots of other people, and like in the analogy, or in the illustration that you're trying to give there, like you're talking about, unless I misunderstood you, you're talking about there's just two people in the desert and that's it. If you're talking about like people that
so question, right? Like what does the number of people involved in a scenario affect what is good or bad?
I think so, yeah. It affects the logic.
Okay, so so if let's say like if I killed one person in a desert, would that be okay? If in what you in our earlier scenario, you would say yes, for the survival of the species. If it was two, would it be okay? If it was three, would it be okay? Like if you keep going, like it's still the same as the Hitler thing, right? Like maybe Hitler feels like he's in the desert, and his species are the Nazis, right? And the enemy is the person that they hate are the Jews. So they need to murder the Jews in order for the survival and thriving of their species, right? So, but I'm not saying that Hitler is right, but I'm
Well,
saying
yeah, I
that
know, but
because if you make it very subjective, then you would have no way to say that someone's moral framework is wrong and yours is the one that's right. So what's gonna happen is then you're gonna fall into this power struggle where the one who effectively it overpowers the other is the one that is right. So so if Hitler did win World War II, then their moral framework would be the one that we would follow. In that case, they subjectively.
yeah, well, to walk back a little bit,
Yeah.
if like in with the desert analogy,
Mhm.
like if there were just two people and you killed the other one, then
It would be okay.
you it may be okay to you, but you wouldn't survive. The species would die out there.
What do you mean?
It would be done.
Why would it be done?
Well, how are you gonna procreate?
Well, maybe I would, find like I would at least, there would be a higher possibility of me, finding a mate, procreating. But so here's the thing though, like you're focusing on the survival of the species. Who said that the survival of the species is good, right? Like, why should we go to that direction?
Well, because we don't, because of empathy, like we don't want, like it's built into our genetics. Like we don't want each other to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
So
you've got
it means that so are the what is so the survival of the species is good, right? And the of course the extermination of our species is bad. But so and you say this is ingrained in our biology. But who ingrained it in our biology? But and if there's anyone to blame, it's actually just by random chances, events, and evolution, right? Brought about by the events of the Big Bang. So in this sense, the, the thing that caused the Big Bang would actually, have set the standards for that made our survival of the species good or bad, right? Because that was where it all started. Do you get what I mean?
yeah, I get what you mean.
Right.
I don't think we have to know, like, I don't know that anybody, I think probably nobody did put it into motion.
Yeah. So
I
if
just don't.
okay, so if nobody put it in motion, then it doesn't actually matter because it was just an accident. So in terms of our genetics, there we have no reason to follow what our genetics tells us is good or bad, right? Because like even if we feel like it's good and hey, my genetics tells me that this is good, this is bad, but your genetics is just a random roll of a dice. So why should you follow that anyways? You could
Yeah,
just
but
live happily being celibate and dying. That would not really affect you.
yeah, a lot of people do.
Exactly. So is what they do wrong, right?
Yeah, well, that's not wrong, but actively going around destroying other lives is.
But why? Because, but you're gonna say again, well, it's detrimental to the species. But again, if the who told you that that is good or bad, being detrimental to a species, from your moral framework.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, it goes back to empathy. Like you wouldn't want to, we, we don't want to hurt other people.
Empathy, though. Tell me, what can you tell me what is empathy?
Empathy, like that's your emotions, like your sentiments for your other, like fellow biological creatures.
So, why should we follow empathy?
We do follow it.
Yeah, but why?
It's because it's part of our nature.
Okay, and if it's part of our nature, again, because of the random roll of a dice, right? Because we just accidentally evolved in this way, you know. So if we accidentally, if we, killing people, raping, it's all, you would say that, it's actually also part of our nature as well. Would you say that's good? Right, like, because we do it, crime and everything at a normal rate, actually, and it's inevitable for us. So would that mean that because it's part of our nature that it's good?
I don't think that killing's good, but in the event that it's necessary, it just
Yeah, but
is.
I'm saying, I'm
Like,
talking about the killing that's criminal, right? By defined by us as bad, like that. Those actions are event. If you look at it, is it actually goes back to our genetics. Because we kill and hate and everything, and it's part of our nature, same as empathy, right?
well, I mean, you don't have to kill just because you hate. And like,
But
if you,
we do, right? So in the case that we
well,
do kill when we hate, so would that be okay? Because it's part of our nature, same as empathy.
well, to kill somebody just because you hate them is wrong.
To
Like,
kill
if,
someone, yeah, why though?
because that's bad. Like, you only want to kill somebody. I mean, it's kind of like abortions. Like, you don't want to just have a senseless abortion just because you can. There needs to be a good reason for it. And just like it's the same in having to kill another human being or even like an animal. Like you don't want to just kill somebody, or you shouldn't just kill somebody just for sport or something. Like there needs to be a valid reason. Like there, and it's
So,
not
so who
that
says
killing
that it
gives.
is necessary to have a valid reason to kill?
That's who says that it's necessary to have a valid reason to kill.
And why
Oh,
is it necessary to have a valid reason to kill? You could say, you could say that it's obvious. Of course, it's self-evident. What you mean by self-evident, right? Like, do So I do agree with you, right? That so we should value human life, right? We should not kill or murder or do evil things. But you have, if you have a moral framework, you have to be consistent with it. You have to be consistent with the actions, right? You can just switch back and forth whenever it's convenient, because right, and so you have to be consistent with everything, and that's why but that's why I'm sort of asking you, trying to understand how you would decide things in terms of morality, uh right, Mark? So I would ask you about how about in terms of politics, right? Would you say you're left wing or right wing?
uh, definitely left.
Oh, can you tell me specific about your your political ideology? Which one? Which one are you on the the left side? Are you on the authoritarian side or the libertarian side?
Libertarian socialist. I like Noam Chomsky a lot.
Oh,
I like,
Chomsky.
yeah.
And can you describe what economics or and what role the government plays in on your worldview, political worldview?
Um, Well, I think that the workforce should be, that the means of production should be much more heavily owned by the workforce,
The means of
basically.
production.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like your jobs, like, your work should be more, you should have a lot more say in your workplace and what you're, like choices, everything down to um, like business decisions. I think like every business should be like a democratic cooperative, basically. Yeah. Sorry, I haven't really been thinking about politics a lot lately, to be honest.
Yeah, it's okay, man. All right. Well,
Yeah.
for example, you mentioned that there should be this egalitarian, and and that workers should have these rights. Yeah. And and especially on the means of production. Of course, they should have the rights to good working environment and everything. Right to good pay, but so when you have your ethical framework that you have, where it's good for the survival of the species, you could actually it could actually disagree with your political ideology, where for example, if it is more useful for the species to maximize the productivity of the workforce, and work them to that work the hell out of them, then in that case, it would actually be good to in turn to be the on the opposite side of what your political stance is.
Yeah, but that's not the case, because there's so much suffering that occurs just at the hands of like unbridled capitalism, that it's just absurd to even think that. It's like only the few people at the top really get the benefit of, unbridled capitalism like that. Like just working the shit out of everybody and like not really doing anything in terms of like a social contract to like, provide a more quality life for the workforce.
So what do you think is the solution to this?
But for workers to have more ownership over it and more involvement.
And how are we gonna achieve that?
Shit, I don't know. That's a good question, bro.
Yeah.
Man, I'm honestly kind of pessimistic about it these days, which is why I haven't been paying attention to politics much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would say like you can't really separate this philosophy and religion with politics, because when you dive into politics, we actually have to look at the moral foundations of what your political stance is, right? And that's why often, like, most right-wing people are Christians or religious people, and the left-wing ones are mostly secular and atheists and humanists, if you observed as well, right?
True. Yeah. I know a lot of left-wing Christians. I think
I guess, yeah.
There's always been a lot of leftist Christians, and most of them even argue, and I really don't know one way or the other on this one, but a lot of them argue that it was actually religious people that started socialist movements, like Jacobin Society. That was Christian.
Yeah, well,
they were definitely
of course,
socialists.
Like Karl Marx, right? Lenin. So I guess and the founders
leftists.
though are really wish for a truly secular society.
Well, like these different schools of thoughts and like logic and reason and all of that philosophy, like that existed before we were able to really talk about it and develop our understanding of these different schools of thought.
Mm-hmm.
Existed much before, like even like if you look at like the early Hebrew tribes and stuff, he's involved. There's some level of government, but I mean, it's nothing.
Yeah, Mark. Well, one last question. So, how do you think we as a human race can flourish with all the polarization and disagreements about worldviews and even on moral frameworks, like, and how can we achieve the good future that we all agree on?
Yeah, I think we continue like doing what me and you are doing right now, like having this conversation about this, kind of having, I mean, this isn't really a debate or anything, but
Yeah,
just kind of, we are having like a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of dialogue, trying to understand each other. Because, like you said, there are a lot of different world views out there. And there are a lot of them that I obviously disagree with. Like you said, a lot of stuff, there's a lot of things that I don't agree with theists about, just like there's a lot of things you probably don't agree with about any number of worldviews out there. And we just kind of continue trying to seek, what the best paths forward are, like asking questions like you're asking, like why should we value certain things? And trying to get other people to think about that too. I think a lot of people are curious about those kind of things, whether they really express that or not. So yeah. I think it's all about participation, like just trying to do things that make the world a better place for those that come after us.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I totally agree.
And I could go on and on about that.
Yeah. And thank you so much for being on the show, bro. And I really apologize for all the issues with my internet. I'm struggling. Have a great day, bro. So that's the end of it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This is your host, Elmo Ador Jr. And thank you for listening in. And please subscribe. Please follow us on Facebook. Please follow this. Please. Thanks.
Hello, this is Discover, and we take customer service very seriously. We know that if you have a question or concern about your credit card, that's a serious matter, and you need to talk to a real person about it. So we offer around-the-clock access to seriously talented representatives in the USA. Again, it's a serious endeavor. The only funny thing about it is Bob. If you call us and Bob answers, you're in for a treat. Get 100% US-based customer service and talk to a real person day or night. Discover. Exceptionally common sense.
Gearheads know that some projects need so many parts, it feels like you need a whole storage unit just to store them. That's what eBay Motors' 122 million parts are for. Think of it as your virtual parts garage. They've always got the right fitment at the right prices. Use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.